Hello! This video concentrates on the local or small-scale scenario for the bio-based logistics. First, I'm going to describe the general vision of the scenario. Then we will consider the inputs, the processes, and the outputs. And finally, we will consider the peculiarities of this scenario from a logistics point of view. The small-scale scenario involves only one farm, or a few neighboring farms, maybe a small biomass production facility. Clearly, this is a small-scale initiative that will affect only a very limited region. The input for the bioprocessing in this case is mainly own biomass, but it may also be possible to use neighbors' biomass. This can be the usual crops, for example, sugar, beet or corn can be used to produce biofuel or plastics instead of the usual uses for the food industry. This can also be agricultural waste, such as leaves, stalks, peels and so on. It can even be wood from trimming the trees or algae from canals and ponds. So on one hand, the inputs differ a lot from case to case and even from season to season. On the other hand, within a case the variety is quite limited, as each farm only has access to few crops or other sources of biomass. Given the small scale of volumes to be processed, limited space and financial capabilities, for the farmers it makes sense to only acquire small and relatively inexpensive processing units. These units can be either owned by the farm or leased for a shorter period. This latter option makes sense given the seasonal supply of the input material. So the processing is limited to basic operations like drying, chipping, milling, fermentation or incineration. The major goal is to increase the content of energy or valuable substances in the processed biomass. This results in pre-processed biomass that can be stored and transported more efficiently to the consumers, which may be either the same on neighboring farms or more advanced processing facilities operating on a larger scale. Some examples of outputs include fibers for the paper industry, proteins for feed, and fuel for energy. Biogas is a good example of a fuel output. The logistics of this scenario is characterized by short distances, as the main flow is from the field to the processing unit, which are supposed to be next to each other. The transportation can be done by tractors and trucks, and no additional infrastructure is needed. A storage facility may be needed to guarantee preservability of the inputs and to flatten the seasonal effects. Ideally, this facility has to be located at the processing unit, or at least as close as possible to avoid excessive transportation. To sum up, the local scenario is focused on processing locally produced biomass within the goal of increasing the value of the resulting products as much as possible, and at the same time to use the residues within the same household as much as possible, for example as a fertilizer. Thank you very much for your attention.